What happened on today's live episode of The View left millions in absolute shock. One moment the audience was laughing, and the very next, the entire studio froze in stunned silence. Joy Behar asked a question so explosive that Michael J. Fox's response blew the show apart. The crowd gasped, the host panicked, and then Joy stood up and said something that turned this moment into the biggest live TV meltdown of the year. What happened next will leave you speechless. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Now let's dive into what really happened. Chaos. Absolute jaw-dropping chaos. If there were ever a moment that defined the unpredictable nature of live television, this was it. The View studio, usually buzzing with playful energy and lively banter, felt different that morning, but no one could quite place their finger on why. The audience filed in, chatting excitedly, unaware that they were steps away from witnessing a meltdown so intense it would dominate social platforms for days. Producers hurried across the floor, adjusting lighting, checking cables, whispering last-minute instructions through their headsets. Everything looked normal, but something in the air felt charged, almost electric. Joy Behar took her seat at the iconic table, flipping through her cue cards with the confidence of someone who has done this 1,000 times. She tossed out a few warm-up jokes, earning polite laughter from the crowd. But behind her smile was something else, something small, hidden, barely noticeable at first glance. A tension, a flicker, a tightness in her eyes that only someone truly observant would catch. At exactly 10:03 a.m., the floor manager raised his hand. Going live in 3, 2, 1, the cameras slid into motion, the lights intensified, and the show kicked off. The first few minutes moved smoothly. News recap, panel reactions, a lighthearted back and forth about trending topics. Joy was sharp, quick, and fiery in her usual way. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The doors at the side of the stage opened, and out stepped legendary Hollywood icon Michael J. Fox. The audience instantly erupted, cheers, applause, whistles, so loud the microphones nearly peaked. Michael smiled warmly, waving to the crowd with that signature humility that has made him beloved for decades. Even the co-hosts clapped with genuine admiration. Joy smiled too, but the flicker returned. Michael sat down, adjusting his jacket, and Joy leaned in to welcome him. He was there to talk about resilience, hope, and his latest advocacy initiative, an emotional, inspiring topic that usually brought the audience to the edge of tears. Everything suggested this would be one of the day's strongest, most uplifting segments. But as the applause died down, that strange, unpredictable energy in the room grew heavier. Joy asked her first question. Simple, friendly, nothing unusual. Michael answered with grace, humor, and charm. The audience nodded along, captivated. The cameras zoomed in for tight shots. Producers smiled in the control room. Everything was going perfectly. But that mysterious flicker beneath Joy's smile, it was getting stronger. She shuffled her cards, adjusted her glasses, shifted in her seat. Something about the conversation seemed to bother her. Not enough for the audience to notice, but enough for the co-host to exchange careful glances. The live atmosphere tightened. A few people in the audience later described it as the feeling before a storm hits. The kind of stillness where the world seems to hold its breath, waiting. Michael continued speaking, sharing heartfelt stories about his journey, his battles, and the importance of staying hopeful even when the world feels unbearable. The audience leaned in closer, drawn by every word. But the camera occasionally caught Joy's face in the background, her expression stiffening, then loosening, then stiffening again. Something was simmering. Then it happened. A tiny misstep, a moment so small, so seemingly harmless, that at first nobody thought anything of it. Joy interrupted Michael. Not rudely, not aggressively, but abruptly enough to jolt the flow of the conversation. Michael paused mid-sentence. The co-hosts straightened in their chairs. The crowd let out a soft, confused murmur. It wasn't a meltdown. It wasn't a clash. Not yet, but it was a spark. The spark that would ignite into one of the most explosive on-air confrontations the show had ever seen. The cameras were rolling. The mics were hot. And within minutes, millions of viewers would be glued to their screens, watching a simple interview transform into a moment destined to explode across YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and every reaction channel imaginable. And the craziest part? No one, not even the host themselves, had any idea how out of control things were about to get. The tension that had started building in the first segment didn't ease. It only intensified. Michael J. Fox was mid-sentence, speaking softly about the emotional challenges of his journey, when Joy Behar leaned forward again. Her cards rustled sharply, the microphones picking up every tiny movement. A few audience members later described the sound as like someone flipping a switch. She interrupted him. It wasn't rude, but it wasn't gentle either. Just sharp enough to cut the flow of the moment. Michael blinked. The co-host shifted, and the viewers at home suddenly felt something was off, like the energy had tilted just slightly sideways. Joy cleared her throat and asked a question, and this one didn't land well. At first, nobody reacted. It was the kind of question that sounded like it might be harmless, if asked with warmth. But Joy's delivery was unusually stiff, almost confrontational. Instead of feeling curious, it felt pointed, personal, almost as if she were probing for something she had no intention of handling delicately. Michael paused. He didn't frown. He didn't glare. But the pause itself said everything. It was long enough to make the studio fall silent. A co-host gently tapped her pen on the table. Another shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Joy. Even the audience leaned back in their seats, sensing the shift. What was supposed to be a heartfelt, inspirational conversation had turned into something colder. Then the camera cut to Joy. She rolled her eyes. It wasn't a big eye roll, not dramatic, not exaggerated, just a small, quick, reflexive gesture. But on live TV, small moments become explosions. The audience gasped, not loudly, but audibly enough that the producers in the control room shot upright. The director whispered, "Stay on Michael, stay on Michael," hoping the moment wouldn't escalate. But it already had. Michael straightened his posture, placing his hands gently on the table. His face remained calm, but his eyes carried a weight, one that spoke of disappointment, not anger, the kind of disappointment that can silence a room more powerfully than shouting ever could. He inhaled slowly, choosing his words with the precision of someone who refuses to escalate conflict, even when it handed to him. "Joy," he said quietly. You never really know what someone is carrying. The audience froze. There was no hostility in his voice, no sarcasm, just raw honesty, the kind that cuts deeper than confrontation. Michael continued, "People struggle in ways we can't see, and sometimes what they need most is compassion, not skepticism." The crowd erupted into applause, loud, long, emotional. The co-host nodded in agreement, almost relieved someone had said it. One host even placed a comforting hand on Michael's shoulder. But Joy, her face tightened. She hadn't expected to be corrected, especially not in front of a live audience, especially not by someone as universally loved as Michael J. Fox. Her jaw tensed. Her fingers gripped her cards. And the bright studio lights suddenly felt hotter, brighter, harsher than before. She forced a smile, but the tension clung to it like static. When the applause died down, she tried to regain control of the segment. Her tone was lighter, but it didn't match her expression. She made a joke, an attempt to dissolve the awkwardness. But the timing was wrong. The audience didn't laugh. The joke thudded to the floor like a weight. Michael looked at her gently, but the contrast between his calm and her discomfort only made the moment more intense. For the first time in the broadcast, Joy looked genuinely rattled. The energy in the studio felt completely different now, charged, unpredictable, almost vibrating. Something had shifted permanently. The audience could feel it. The co-host could feel it. Even the crew behind the cameras could feel the tremor. And the viewers at home? They were glued to their screens, sensing that the storm had only just begun. Because Joy's question hadn't just crossed a line, it had set the stage for the clash that would soon blow the entire show wide open. The air inside the studio had become so thick, you could almost feel it pressing against your skin. After Joy's failed attempt at humor, A strange, uneasy quiet settled over the table. Viewers watching at home didn't just see the tension. They felt it, like a spark hovering inches above gasoline. Michael J. Fox gently folded his hands, leaning forward just enough for the cameras to catch his expression clearly. He wasn't angry. He wasn't annoyed. But he was undeniably disappointed. And somehow, that expression carried far more weight than rage ever could. "So," he said calmly, picking up where Joy's joke had landed dead on the floor, "as I was saying, compassion matters." The audience instantly erupted into supportive applause. Not polite, not casual, but loud, clearly siding with him. Joy's face stiffened. The co-hosts glanced at each other, their smiles frozen, eyes wide. You could practically hear them thinking, "Oh no, this is going bad." Even the producers behind the glass stared at the monitors with their hands hovering over buttons, unsure whether to cut the commercial or ride out the storm. But it was too late. Much, much too late. Joy leaned back in her chair, forcing a tight smile as the applause faded. Then, with a tone that carried more edge than warmth, she said, "Well, Michael, some of us cope with things differently. Humor is part of my job." Michael didn't look away, didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. He simply responded with a calm that was sharper than any confrontation. "And empathy," he said softly, "is part of being human." Boom. The room detonated. The audience erupted again, this time with cheers mixed into the applause. The tension was so intense that people were literally sitting forward in their seats, gripping their armrests. The entire studio shook with noise, and a few audience members even stood up. Joy froze. Her eyes widened. A split second of vulnerability caught crystal clear by camera 3. The producers didn't cut away. They didn't dare. They knew. In that moment, the ratings were skyrocketing. Michael continued, his voice warm but firm. "Everyone is fighting battles," he said, "even when you can't see them. And sometimes a moment of kindness can make all the difference." Another wave of applause. Another blow to Joy's composure. Her co-host, sitting beside her, whispered, "Joy, it's okay." But Joy didn't acknowledge it. She stared at Michael as if trying to regain control of the conversation, but it was slipping out her hands like water. Finally, trying to recover, she said, "I wasn't trying to be unkind. It was just a question." Michael nodded gently. "I know, but tone matters too." That line hit harder than any audience saw coming. People gasped audibly. Twitter was exploding. Clips were being screen recorded in real time. Joy's composure cracked. Her lips tightened. Her cheeks flushed. Her hands trembled ever so slightly as she shuffled her cards again. She wasn't used to being challenged on air. Certainly not like this. Definitely not by someone who wasn't even trying to fight back. Because Michael wasn't fighting. He was just telling the truth. And the truth, spoken calmly, can be the sharpest weapon of all. One co-host tried to jump in, desperate to redirect the conversation before it spiraled completely. "So," she said loudly, clapping her hands, "let's talk about your new." But Joy cut her off, leaning forward again. "No, wait," she said, her voice wavering. The audience held their breath. She looked at Michael. "I didn't mean to offend you." Michael smiled softly. "I'm not offended. I just think we need to be careful. People look up to you. Words matter." That was it. The line that shattered whatever remained of Joy's patience. Not because it was harsh, because it was true. And nothing stings harder than the truth delivered calmly, publicly, and in front of millions. The studio fell completely silent. No cameras moved. No co-host dared speak. No audience member even coughed. They all knew something irreversible had just happened. Joy Behar had been challenged, directly, openly, undeniably, on live television. And the clash had shaken the table in a way no one would forget anytime soon. As soon as the cameras cut to a commercial break, the studio atmosphere shifted from tense to chaotic. The controlled hum of live television gave way to the wild energy of panic behind the scenes. Producers rushed across the floor, headsets squeaking with frantic instructions. Co-hosts whispered hurriedly to each other, glancing nervously at Joy and Michael. Crew members scrambled to ensure cameras, microphones, and lights remained ready, all while silently bracing for what they knew could erupt at any second. Joy Behar sat frozen for a moment, her fingers clutching the cue cards so tightly the paper edges crumpled. Her face was pale, eyes darting between co-host and crew, her usual confidence nowhere to be seen. The polite, professional demeanor she carried for decades had slipped, revealing a storm of frustration, embarrassment, and disbelief. Staff members later describe her as visibly shaken, almost like she couldn't process what had just happened in real time. Michael J. Fox, in stark contrast, remained composed. He leaned back calmly in his chair, quietly speaking to producers and crew, ensuring everyone felt okay. He wasn't retaliating, didn't raise his voice, and didn't allow the moment to escalate further. His presence alone made the tension palpable, his calm acting almost like a magnifying lens, highlighting Joy's sudden vulnerability. Producers quietly approached, trying to offer support and diffuse the situation. "Joy, it's okay," one whispered. "Take a deep breath, we'll handle it." But she shook her head subtly, standing abruptly. Her movement was sharp, decisive, and deliberate, a clear signal that she was stepping away from the situation. Cameras caught her rising, the studio lights glinting off the table as she turned. Staff reported hearing her mutter a single, chilling line. "I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore." The words hung in the air. No one knew if she meant just for the day, for the week, or permanently. Panic and speculation rippled through the crew as whispers spread like wildfire. People instinctively pulled out phones, texting social media managers, directors, and colleagues. Every staff member knew this wasn't just another tense moment. It was a historic one. Michael, still seated, glanced at Joy with concern, but he didn't push. He gave her the space she clearly needed, understanding that live television sometimes brings out raw, unpredictable emotion. Meanwhile, co-hosts tried to continue the segment in the background, nervously rehearsing lines they hadn't practiced, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for the audience still watching. Backstage, the fallout continued. Producers debated whether to cut to a different segment or let the cameras roll. Social media teams began noticing the first wave of clips from viewers already recording the confrontation. Reactions, comments, and GIFs started circulating even before the episode returned from commercial. Clips of Michael's calm, heartfelt words versus Joy's visible frustration quickly went viral within minutes. The energy backstage became electric and unsteady, the kind that only comes when something unprecedented occurs live. Everyone sensed that whatever unfolded on that set in those few minutes was going to dominate conversations online, trend across platforms, and become a defining live TV moment of the week, maybe even the year. And through it all, Joy Behar walked away. Each step she took toward her dressing room felt like a drumbeat signaling a historic shift. She didn't answer questions. She didn't acknowledge the co-host's attempts to reason with her. The crew followed silently, afraid to break the fragile atmosphere, aware that the next few moments would determine how the world saw the aftermath of one of the most dramatic clashes in daytime television history. The word meltdown began circulating among staff almost immediately. Emails, texts, and whispered conversations spread like wildfire. Joy Behar walked out, live, after Michael J. Fox. The moment had transcended the studio. It had already entered the realm of social media legend. No one could deny it. Backstage, everything had broken, and nothing would ever feel the same again. By the time the cameras returned from the commercial break, the live audience was already buzzing with whispers. Something monumental had just happened. Joy Behar had walked off, leaving a stunned Michael J. Fox, the co-host, and the studio staff in tense silence. But the real explosion was yet to come. On the internet, within minutes, viewers who had been streaming the show live began uploading clips to social media. The moment Joy's frustration collided with Michael's calm, composed responses went viral instantly. Hashtags like hashtag Joy vs. Michael, hashtag LiveTVMeltdown, and hashtag The View Drama began trending across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The clips racked up millions of views in real time, with reaction videos popping up almost simultaneously. Some viewers were outraged at Joy's behavior. Others were praising Michael's poise under pressure. Comment sections exploded with speculation. Did she really quit live on air? Michael handled that perfectly. News outlets didn't waste a second. Headlines flashed across screens. Joy Behar walks out during live episode, or Michael J. Fox shocks the View studio. Analysts and commentators began breaking down every frame, every glance, every gesture. The audience was captivated not just by the clash itself, but by the drama unfolding behind the scenes. The very human moments of tension, pride, and vulnerability. Meanwhile, the studio remained in a stunned quiet. Producers tried to continue the show, but the energy had shifted irrevocably. Every host, crew member, and even the audience could feel that what had just occurred was unprecedented. Michael J. Fox returned to discussion, trying to gently steer the show back to its planned segment, but the aura of that explosive confrontation lingered like smoke in the air. Backstage, Joy's dressing room became a focal point of speculation. Reporters, social media managers, and staff members debated whether she would return or if her exit signaled a permanent departure. Sources whispered that she had been deeply shaken, not just by the confrontation, but by the realization that millions of viewers had witnessed her most vulnerable moment. It was raw, unfiltered, and deeply human. Meanwhile, viewers online continued to dissect every second. Memes, reaction compilations, and even humorous edits flooded platforms. Clips showing Michael calmly delivering his line about empathy and compassion, juxtaposed with Joy's tightening jaw, were shared thousands of times. Within hours, the story became not just a viral sensation, but a cultural talking point, sparking debates about professionalism, empathy, and the unpredictable nature of live television. And then came the speculation that truly set the internet ablaze. Would Joy Behar quit for good? Every fan, critic, and casual viewer had a theory. Was this the end of an era for one of daytime television's longest-standing stars? Social media polls, trending hashtags, and viral videos amplified the tension. Millions were watching, sharing, and commenting in real time, turning a single live TV clash into a global phenomenon. By the evening, the clip had racked up millions of views across platforms. Fans debated in forums, news channels ran extended analyses, and reaction videos dominated YouTube's trending page. What had started as a lighthearted interview had exploded into the biggest live TV moment of the year. Michael J. Fox's calm, heartfelt words contrasted sharply with Joy Behar's visible frustration, creating a story that everyone wanted to witness, share, and discuss. In the end, one thing was clear. The exit had changed everything. Joy Behar's walkout, Michael J. Fox's composed confrontation, and the audience's stunned reactions combined to create a viral moment that would be remembered for years to come. It was more than drama. It was a perfect storm of tension, emotion, and live television unpredictability. And as viewers around the world replayed the clips, commented on reactions, and debated who won the clash, one thing was certain. This moment had already become a historic highlight of daytime TV, immortalized online for generations to come.